Hey, it's Jeremy from OpticHouse.com. So, last drawing video, I talked a little bit about my process, about working on vellum, flipping my pages, and the current process I'm using. But I didn't really go into why I've developed the process that I'm using. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. The reason why I work the way I do is because my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, I was drawing it pretty much the way that most artists do, where it's drawn on 11 by 17 Bristol. But the problem is that I am an extremely messy and indecisive artist. I tend to pencil and erase, redraw stuff, move it around, and then of course when I flip my pages on a light box, they look even messier. And the flipping pages on the light box, for those who don't know, it's an old trick that comes back from as far as Renaissance painters, possibly farther. I haven't really checked the art history on it. But when you look at a drawing or painting in a mirror image and see its reflection, seeing it in its reflection will allow you to look at the image objectively. So if there's things that are out of proportion or just don't line up or just look wonky, things that you might not notice just because your brain isn't trained to see it when you draw it. Normally when you look at that mirror reflection of it, all of a sudden it'll jump out like, oh, damn, this arm is way too long or too short, or this nose is pointing the wrong way. And I also have to give a shout out to my friend Carl Altstetter, who hounded me to no end for months to start flipping my drawings until I finally started making a habit of it. So thanks, Carl, for being persistent. Anyway, so when I was working on Eye of the Gods, if I were to just sit down and start penciling my pages, the finished Bristol board, by the time I was done, before I even inked it, it just had so much erasure on it that it was kind of smudged and just dirty. It didn't look good. I mean, as far as I was concerned in terms of a finished piece of artwork, even when I was scanning it in, I would have to really adjust the levels to get rid of a lot of the erasing marks, because I'm heavy-handed and pressed too hard, and it just made a whole mess of the page. So what I started doing was I would take my rough layouts, I would blow them up I drew them on index cards, 3x5 or 4x6 index cards. I would blow them up to 11 by 17, and I would trace those to 11 by 17 copy paper. And then on that copy paper, I would work out, anatomy, perspective, adjusting the composition from the thumbnails into something that was close to what the finished page would be. And once I had it, looking fairly close to the rough layouts that I go to inks these days, once I had something in that ballpark, I would turn on a light box, put that on there, and I would trace it to a clean sheet of Bristol board. Then, once I had on that clean sheet of Bristol board, I would, in theory, I would go directly to inks. But the problem that I found consistently was that, I would do my blown up rough layouts, and then I would, flip them, look at the mirror image, and I would make corrections on on that copy paper version. When I made those corrections, then I would trace that to the Bristol board. But for some reason, I never figured out why. Maybe it's just impatience and I was drawing too fast and not attention to detail. But for whatever reason, when I would use the light box and transfer my rough layouts to my sheets of Bristol board, I would always, not always, but frequently, for everything that I fixed in correcting it, there was things that I lost in copying over. Either I lost some of that vital energy that makes a page feel vibrant and interesting, or I would, gunk up the anatomy. I would, just somehow it wouldn't look as good as I wanted the final page to do, so I would end up flipping that again on the Bristol board and then making erasures and corrections, and it ended up just making me redraw things a lot of times. Sometimes that's good, but in this case it ended up more being a detriment. And so, that was how I worked for the entire graphic novel, tracing, copying over the rough pencils, then fixing them on the Bristol, then inking it. And then sometimes with the ink I would still have to go in and patch things here and there. And so when I finished that graphic novel, I thought, all right, how can I eliminate steps so I don't have to do as much, copying, tracing, and redrawing? And that is how I, developed the vellum method. And I'll get into that a little bit more in my next video. I already broke down the the method, but I still haven't broken down so much of the why. So now that you have the context, I'll tell you a bit more about how it actually helps me get stuff done sooner. That's all for now. Check out my website, optichouse.com, for some cool comic books and artwork.